Title: Reddit's Unsolved Mysteries are truly terrifying. The first time I saw the man in the smiling mask, he was standing at the edge of my bed. But the chilling part wasn't him being there. It was that my dog, who barked at literally everything, was sleeping silently at his feet. Now, that isn't the opening line to a story from a horror subreddit like r no sleep. That's the beginning of a story shared as a real experience, the kind of encounter that blurs the line between the strange and the sinister. Because beyond the fictional horror, there's a darker side of Reddit, a place where people share real-life chilling encounters and disturbing unsolved mysteries. These stories become warnings, puzzles with missing pieces, and glimpses into the unsettling idea that maybe, just maybe, the truth is scarier than anything we could ever invent. Section 1. The doppelganger who works your job. There's a special kind of dread that comes from seeing your own life play out without you, and it's at the heart of a story posted by a user who worked as a pest control technician. It all started pretty innocently. A neighbor, Maria, waved at him one night as he was getting home. "Back already?" she asked. He told her he'd just arrived. Her confusion was the first tiny crack in his reality. "But I saw you leave like 10 minutes ago," she insisted. "You looked right at me." He'd been out all day. He brushed it off an innocent mistake, someone who looked like him. But then it happened again. The next day, he had 5 missed calls from a regular client, a sharp ex-military guy named Dan. When he finally called back, Dan sounded off. "You didn't come by this morning, did you?" The user said no. His appointment wasn't for another month. Dan's reply sent a shiver down his spine. He described seeing someone in the user's exact uniform, walking around his house that morning, sprayer on their shoulder. The description was perfect, but the person never knocked, a crucial part of the technician's routine. Later, Dan sent him the Ring camera footage. The user watched himself on the screen. It was his build, his uniform, even his slight limp. But the sprayer was slung over the left shoulder. He always used his right. It was him, but it wasn't. The incidents got more personal, more invasive. He came home one night, and his dog, who usually went nuts when he walked in, was just lying quietly in the hallway, watching him, not scared, just different. Later that night, he found an old work shirt, one he hadn't touched in a week, laid out neatly on his dresser. He never did that. His windows were locked. The door was chained. Nothing was out of place, but everything was wrong. Who was this person? A prankster with an impossible eye for detail. Or something else? The user said he eventually installed a lock on his bedroom door, not just out of fear, but because he was desperate to know if it would open, to finally see who or what was slowly replacing him. The events eventually just stopped, leaving him with a mystery that was never solved, and a paranoia that at any moment he could be made redundant in his own life. Section 2. The Man in the Ceiling. Some stories that circulate on Reddit are terrifying because they feel like they shouldn't be possible. They defy logic, leaving us with questions that have no good answers. This is the case with a story that has become a piece of internet folklore, a tale so disturbing it's been shared and debated for years. It's about 2 men in South Africa, Tetek Konsi and Sandal Sibaya, whose fates are linked by a horrifying and seemingly impossible circumstance. While this story is a staple of online forums, it's worth noting it has not been corroborated by official news reports, making it a true modern mystery legend. The story goes that in 2004, Tetek Konsi was a patient in a hospital recovering from major surgery. He was so ill he could barely move. One day, a nurse came into his room, stepped out for just a moment to get fresh linens, and when she returned, Tetek was gone, vanished. A man physically incapable of getting out of his own bed had disappeared from a secure hospital room. The hospital searched everywhere for a week, but found nothing. The mystery took a gruesome turn when maintenance workers were called to fix something in the ceiling. When they opened the panels above the very ward he'd been in, they found him. Tetech Konsi was dead, curled into a fetal position. The autopsy was even more baffling. It concluded he hadn't died of natural causes, and even more chillingly, that he had been placed in the ceiling. How? This is where the story goes from a nightmare to something else entirely. A few months later, in a completely different hospital, a man named Sandal Sibaya was admitted with a broken femur, also leaving him immobile. He was scheduled for a transfer, but when staff went to his room to get him, he was gone. Just like Tetik. After a foul odor began to spread through the hospital, they checked the one place that seemed impossible. They opened the ceiling, and there he was, Sandal Sibaya, dead, in the exact same fetal position. The conclusion was identical. He did not die of natural causes and had been placed there. 2 men, 2 hospitals, both unable to move, vanish and are found dead in the ceiling in the same bizarre manner. No suspects, no witnesses, no logical explanation. Whether it's a true, undocumented crime or a brilliantly crafted piece of horror fiction, its power lies in the total lack of answers. Section 3. The Lady in the Monitor. Our final story is a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying threats are the ones that creep into our homes through our own technology. It's a simple story, posted on Reddit about a user's cousin, but its implications are what make it so deeply unsettling. A new mother, let's call her Jessica, was at home with her sister. Her newborn was asleep in the nursery, with a video baby monitor watching over the crib. The 2 sisters were just relaxing in the living room when Jessica's sister got up to go to the kitchen. As she walked past the baby monitor, her face went white. She slowly turned back to Jessica and said with a shaky voice that there was a grown woman in a white dress standing over the crib, holding the baby. They were supposed to be alone. Pure, primal fear shot through them. They scrambled off the couch and sprinted to the nursery, hearts pounding, expecting the absolute worst. They threw the door open, but the room was empty. The baby was sleeping peacefully in the crib, all alone. Every door and window was locked. There was no sign of anyone, no explanation for what the sister had seen so clearly on the monitor just seconds before. To this day, the sister swears by what she saw. So what was it? A ghost? A glitch in the monitor picking up a stray signal from another house? Or something far worse, an intruder who was somehow able to get in and out of a locked house without a trace, leaving behind only a single terrifying image on a screen? This story is a perfect example of modern folklore, tapping into the deepest fears of any parent, the vulnerability of a sleeping child, and the horror of seeing a threat where there should be safety. There was never an explanation. That image on the monitor is now a single terrifying frame in their family's history. A mystery that was never solved and a fear that was never put to rest. Conclusion. A doppelganger who seems to be stealing your life. An impossible crime that defies all logic. A phantom figure in a baby's crib. These are the kinds of stories that thrive in the dark corners of the internet. The communities where they're shared, like our Let's Not Meet and our Unresolved Mysteries, have become our modern-day digital campfire. Are these accounts true? Are they fiction? Sometimes it's the not knowing that's the scariest part. They remind us that the world might be a little stranger than we think, filled with events that linger in your mind long after you've logged off. So, what about you? Have you ever had an encounter you couldn't explain? Or seen something that logic just couldn't debunk? Share your own stories in the comments below. And if you want to fall deeper down the rabbit hole of real-life horror and unsolved mysteries, make sure to like and subscribe for more. Stay safe and keep your eyes open. You really never know what you might see. Creepy Alone at Work Stories. It's 11:47 p.m. The only sounds in the entire 5-story building are the click of my mouse, the low drone of the server room down the hall, and the occasional disappointing sip of my lukewarm coffee. You know, that kind of deep, oppressive quiet you get when you're the only one left. The kind that's supposed to make you more productive. At least, that's what I told myself. It was a flimsy excuse for a much simpler truth. Being the last person in a huge, silent office is just unsettling. The building feels hollowed out, like a skeleton of what it is during the day. This late, it isn't a place of business. It's just a place. And I was completely alone in it. Then, a new sound. A sharp ping from the computer, but it wasn't an email or a normal chat notification. It was a message from some old internal messaging client we barely ever used. A ghost of a program. The username was just Observer, and the message had only 2 words. I see you. I just stared at that little black text box in the corner of my screen. I see you? My first thought wasn't fear. It was annoyance. It had to be Mark from IT. He was the only other person who even knew how to use this old system, and he has the sense of humor of a 12-year-old. He was probably logged in from home, trying to spook the guy burning the midnight oil. It was lame, but it was an explanation I could live with. In an empty building at midnight, you cling to any plausible explanation you can find. Otherwise, your mind starts to drift, and that's when the shadows start to look like people. I typed back, a little smirk on my face. Very funny, Mark. Don't you have a server to reboot or something? I took another sip of my coffee, fully expecting a quick reply, like gotcha, or some stupid emoji. But instead, seconds ticked by. Then a full minute. The silence in the office suddenly felt heavier, like it was pressing in on me. The gentle hum of my computer now sounded like a low growl. The isolation I was used to now felt sharp, menacing. The reply finally came. It wasn't from Mark. I'm not Mark, and you should get a new coffee mug. The chip on the rim looks like it could cut your lip. My blood went cold. I slowly lowered the mug and looked at it, and there it was. A tiny, hairline crack on the rim, right where my mouth had been. It had been there for months. A small imperfection I never bothered to fix. It was something you'd only notice if you were close. Very close. My heart started hammering against my ribs. This wasn't a prank from someone logged in remotely. My cubicle is in the middle of a massive open-plan floor. The only way to see the chip on my mug would be to be standing right next to me, or watching me through a camera. I spun around in my chair, my eyes scanning the dark sea of empty desks. Nothing. Just the eerie orange glow of the emergency exit signs reflecting on the floor. I looked up at the ceiling, searching for a security camera. There was one, but it was 50 feet away, aimed at the main entrance. There was no way it could see a tiny chip on a coffee mug. The fear wasn't just in my head anymore. It felt real, like someone was sitting in the empty chair right next to me. The feeling of being alone, which was a comfort just minutes ago, had twisted into pure vulnerability. My hands were shaking as I typed. Who is this? What do you want? I just want to watch. You're so dedicated. Not many people would stay this late to finish the quarterly expense reports, especially after spilling coffee on page 3 and having to start over. Same spot as last time. My breath hitched in my throat. I had spilled coffee, maybe an hour ago, a dark stain on the 3rd page. I'd cursed under my breath, tossed the ruined sheet, and started over. It was a private moment of frustration, a secret between me and the recycling bin. And this person, this observer, had seen it. This was a new kind of terror. It wasn't about a physical threat anymore. It was about the complete and utter violation of being watched. My mind was racing, trying to find a rational explanation. A hacker? Someone who'd gotten into my webcam? I reached over and slapped a sticky note over the tiny lens on my monitor. It felt like such a flimsy, pathetic defense. A paper shield against a ghost. I typed again. I'm calling security. The reply was instant. Frank won't answer. It's his daughter's birthday. He ducked out 20 minutes early to make it to her party. He forgot to log it too. Naughty Frank. That was impossible. I knew Frank, the night guard. He was a sweet older guy who always had a story. How could this person know he'd left early? How could they know about his daughter's birthday? It was too personal, too specific. This wasn't some hacker across the world. This felt intimate. It felt local. The person sending these messages had access to things that weren't just digital, but physical, personal. All my bravado vanished, replaced by a primal urge to just get out. I stood up so fast, my chair scraped loudly across the floor. I had to leave. Now. I grabbed my keys and phone, forgetting my jacket completely. My eyes shot back to the screen. Leaving so soon? Don't forget your jacket. It's the one you wore last Thursday to that little cafe on Elm Street. The one with the pretty barista you're too scared to talk to. Her name is Sarah, by the way. She thinks you have nice eyes. I froze. This wasn't about work anymore. They had followed me. They had seen me outside of this building. They knew about a crush I'd never said out loud to anyone. The line between my work life and my personal life had just been completely erased. The fear was no longer just about being watched. It was about being known. Totally and completely known by a faceless stranger. Every shadow in the office seemed to stretch and twist, hiding someone. A surge of defiant anger took over. Who did this person think they were? I wasn't going to be their toy. I stormed away from my desk, not towards the exit, but towards the IT office. Mark might not be the prankster, but he was my only shot. He could trace the user. He could find them. As I walked, the motion-activated lights flickered on ahead of me, lighting up a lonely path through the dark cubicles. With each step, I felt more and more exposed, like I was in a spotlight. I heard the faint sound from my desk behind me. I ignored it. I got to the IT office and pulled the handle. Locked. Of course, it was locked. I slammed my fist against the glass, but it was useless. Defeated, I started the long walk back. As I got closer to my desk, I could see the new message glowing on my screen. The IT office is a dead end. Mark's password is based on his dog's name, but you'll never guess it. Besides, I'm not on the network. I'm much closer than that. Closer than that. The words just hung in the air, thick and suffocating. My eyes darted around the office, the server room. The low hum that I found comforting earlier now sounded like a predator. It was just down the hall, a windowless, soundproofed room, a perfect place to hide, a place with access to everything. My phone felt like a brick in my hand. I had to call the police. I couldn't trust building security. I dialed 911, my thumb hovering over the call button. Another message, but this time it wasn't text. It was a file, an image file. My heart stopped. With a trembling finger, I clicked on it. It was a picture of me. It was taken from a high angle, from a dark corner of the office just behind me. I was at my desk, my back to the camera, my hand reaching for my phone. It had been taken just seconds ago, but the most chilling detail was in the foreground, slightly out of focus. A hand holding a phone, taking the picture. They weren't in the server room. They were here, on my floor, hiding in the darkness, somewhere right behind me. I didn't scream. The sound was caught in my throat, a knot of pure ice. I dropped my phone on the desk and I just ran. I didn't grab my jacket or my keys. I just ran. I sprinted across the open floor, my footsteps echoing like gunshots in the silence. The motion-activated lights flickered on ahead, chasing away the shadows just a second too late. Every dark corner I passed felt like a mouth, ready to swallow me. I burst through the stairwell door and scrambled down flight after flight of stairs, not daring to wait for the elevator. When I finally slammed through the emergency exit on the ground floor, The cold night air hit my face like a slap. I didn't stop running until I was half a block away, standing under the bright, safe glow of a streetlight, gasping for air, my heart about to explode out of my chest. Conclusion. The police came. They swept the entire building, floor by floor. They found nothing. No forced entry. No one hiding in the server room or in the dark corners of my office. My desk was exactly as I had left it, with my phone and keys sitting right there. On my computer, the chat program was closed. There was no log of the conversation. It was like it never happened. I quit my job the next day. I couldn't go back there. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of being known so intimately by a complete stranger. The official police report called it a cruel but sophisticated prank. A hacker who probably found a flaw in the old software. That's the rational explanation. But that doesn't explain how they knew about Frank's daughter, or the barista at the cafe, or the chip on my coffee mug. It doesn't explain the picture. A picture that, by the time the police looked at my computer, was gone. Sometimes I still think about the last message I saw on my screen as I was running away. I only caught a glimpse of it. I tried to tell myself I imagined it, that my panicked mind made it up. But I know what I saw. You have nice eyes. It'll be a shame to see the light go out of them. The observer was never found. The fear was never resolved. And all I'm left with is this chilling, lingering unease. If you have a creepy story about being alone at work, I want to hear it. Share it in the comments below, because I read every single one. And if you want more stories like this one, the kind that will make you look over your shoulder the next time you're working late, make sure to like and subscribe. It lets me know you want more. Stay safe out there. He was slumped behind the counter of the all-night oasis. Have you ever seen something that just completely breaks your brain? Something that shatters your whole understanding of the world, leaving you with one single, impossible piece of proof. For one exhausted gas station attendant, that proof was a feather that had no business existing. The sign called it the all-night oasis, which I always thought was a sick joke. An oasis is supposed to be a safe place, a refuge. This place, slumped on the shoulder of some forgotten highway, was the opposite. It was a fluorescent-lit purgatory for lost souls and truckers, running on fumes and regret. And for the last 3 years, it's been my purgatory. I'm Dale, and I'm pretty sure my natural state of being is tired. Not just sleepy, but a deep down, in my bones tired that no amount of stale, lukewarm coffee could even touch. That night started out like any other. Rain was hammering the big plate glass windows, each drop making a desperate, zigzagging path before disappearing into the dark. Inside, the air was thick with the usual smells. Old coffee, industrial cleaner, and the low, steady hum of the coolers. That hum was the soundtrack to my life. I was slouched behind the counter, scrolling on my phone and doing my best to ignore the list of missed calls from Sarah, my ex. We'd had another fight, which meant another night of me hiding out in the lonely, sterile quiet of the gas station. Outside, the storm was really starting to throw a fit. The rain wasn't just falling anymore. It was an assault, pounding on the roof like it had a personal problem with the place. The wind howled and made the big windows groan. I remember thinking it was the kind of night where things can hide in the noise, where the darkness feels like it's pressing in on you. I wasn't really scared, though. I was too tired for that. I was just waiting for the clock to finally let me go, to release me back into the gray morning light. I had no idea I wasn't waiting for the morning. I was waiting for her. The bell over the door chimed. The sound was so unexpected in the middle of the storm. It was like a gunshot. It was a tiny, tinny sound, easily drowned out by the wind and rain, but at 2 a.m., it was wrong. Nobody stops here in weather like this. Nobody. I looked up from my phone, already annoyed. She was standing just inside the door, a puddle forming at her feet on the cheap floor tiles. She wasn't just wet. She looked like she'd been pulled from the bottom of a lake. Her clothes, a simple, dark dress from no particular time period, were plastered to a frame that was impossibly tall and thin. Gaunt. That's the word that got stuck in my head. She was unnervingly, frighteningly gaunt, but she wasn't shivering. I cleared my throat and sat up a little straighter on my stool. "Can I help you?" She didn't answer, didn't even look at me. Her head was tilted, like she was listening to something only she could hear. And then she started to move. She didn't walk. She glided. Her feet made no sound on the floor as she drifted down the snack aisle, her long, pale fingers hovering over bags of chips and candy bars, but never touching anything. A cold, heavy dread started to settle in my chest. This wasn't some traveler looking for shelter. This was something else entirely. I watched her, my heart starting to pound a rhythm that was completely out of step with the drone of the coolers. Her long black hair was stuck to her skull, showing off the sharp, bird-like angles of her face. But it was her eyes that really got me. When she finally turned her head, and I saw them in the harsh fluorescent light, I realized they were just voids. Not dark, not black, but like two obsidian pits that drank the light and reflected nothing back. The whole feel of the store started to change. A chill crept into the air, so deep it felt like it was freezing my bones. It had nothing to do with the storm outside. This was an unnatural, dead cold. The smell of rain was suddenly gone, replaced by a sharp, clean scent, like the air right after a lightning strike. The smell of ozone. The lights overhead started to flicker, their normal buzz turning into an angry crackle. The old radio behind the counter, which had been playing static, went completely dead. Every familiar, boring piece of my nightly prison was being twisted into something threatening. She got to the end of the aisle and stopped. Then, with that same smooth, unreal motion, she turned to face me. Her empty eyes locked on mine. There was no emotion in them, no anger, no malice, just a huge, terrifying emptiness. The feeling of being watched cranked up to 1,000, becoming a physical weight on my skin. I felt a vibration start in my feet, a deep, low hum that I could feel in my teeth. It felt like a growl, but it was a sound I felt more than heard, a primal warning that went straight to the oldest, most terrifying part of my brain. She started coming toward the counter. One silent step after another, the cold got worse. I could see my own breath fogging in the air. My hand tried to reach for the dead phone on the counter, but my fingers felt thick and numb. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. Her stare had me pinned, like a bug under glass. She stopped right in front of the counter, maybe 3 feet away. That subsonic growl was vibrating through the floor, the counter, right through me. The air was electric, buzzing with some kind of unseen power. Her blank, empty face was the last thing I saw before the world just exploded. A crack of thunder shook the entire building, so loud and close that I yelled out and threw my arms over my head. In that exact same instant, lightning flashed, and the world went white. Not just bright, a total, painful, searing whiteness that burned an afterimage onto the inside of my eyelids. It felt like it lasted forever, but it was over in a second. When I could see again, blinking against the dancing spots of light, she was gone. The silence that came after was almost more shocking than the noise. The thunder was just a distant rumble now. The rain was a gentle tapping on the roof. The violent, angry heart of the storm had passed like it was never even there. The air was still cool, but that deep, predatory chill was gone. The lights were steady. The radio behind me crackled back on with the faint sound of some late-night talk show. My first thought was that I'd finally lost it, that the exhaustion and the loneliness had teamed up to break my mind. I looked frantically around the store. The aisles were empty. The puddle of water by the door was gone. The door was still locked from the inside. The deadbolt slid firmly into place. The bell never chimed. She hadn't left. She had just vanished. I stood there for God knows how long, my body shaking with an adrenaline rush I hadn't felt in years. My heart was hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. I slid off the stool, my legs wobbly, and took a shaky step out from behind the counter. My mind was just a tornado of denial and panic. I must have fallen asleep. It had to be a nightmare, some crazy, vivid dream. It was the only answer that let my world make sense. But then I saw it. There, on the grimy, worn-out surface of the counter, right where she had been standing, was a single feather. It was the proof. The one thing that told me my reality had just been broken open. I reached out with a trembling hand and touched it. It wasn't from any bird I'd ever seen. It was about 5 inches long and black as coal, but when it caught the light, it shimmered with this impossible oily iridescence flashes of deep green, purple, and blue that twisted on its surface. It felt strangely heavy, and the texture was all wrong. It felt both living and fake, smooth but sharp, like polished volcanic glass. I picked it up. Holding it, I knew with a terrifying certainty that I hadn't been dreaming. She was real. The storm was real. The terror was real. And this feather, this impossible thing, was what she left me. It was the only evidence I had of the moment my world shattered. I never saw her again. The rest of the night just blurred by in a quiet, terrified haze. But something inside me was different. The exhaustion was still there, but now it was mixed with a new kind of energy. Fear. The world wasn't just a boring, predictable place anymore. It was a place with shadows in the corners, a place where impossible things could ride in on a storm and leave a piece of themselves behind. My life wasn't just my own anymore. It was now split into the before and the long, uncertain after of the night a monster visited the all-night oasis and left me with nothing but a question and a single unearthly feather. Conclusion. And that's where Dale's story ends, with a man, a question, and one impossible feather. What do you think she was? A ghost? Some creature from another dimension? Have you ever had an experience that just defied all logic? Let us know your thoughts and your own strange stories down in the comments. If this story gave you chills, make sure to like and subscribe for more tales from the edge of what we know. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss another trip into the shadows. 7 Terrifying Retail Worker Encounters Story 1. It was a Tuesday, just 2 hours into my shift. The store was quiet, and I was just trying to get through the day. I never thought I'd have to make a choice between a stolen television and my own life. It started how it always does. A group of people walk in, 4 of them. They split up immediately, which is the first red flag. But in a big box store, it's not unusual. I was in electronics, tidying up the video game aisle, when I saw 2 of them by the high-end TVs. They weren't looking at prices. They were looking at me, at the cameras, at the exits. This is the new reality. Organized retail crime isn't just a line item on a corporate report anymore. It's a force that's becoming more aggressive and sophisticated. These weren't kids grabbing a candy bar. These were professionals. One of them, a woman in a large coat despite the warm weather, came up to me and started asking a string of nonsensical questions about smartwatches. A classic distraction. As I tried to explain the difference between 2 models, I heard the telltale snap of a security wire being cut. My head shot up. Her 2 accomplices had a 65-inch TV off the display and were moving fast towards the fire exit. The 4th member of their crew was already there, holding the door open. My training kicked in. Asterisk, observe, and report. Don't engage. Asterisk, but my manager, a stickler for the rules who was still new, came running from the back office. "Hey, you can't do that," he yelled, sprinting toward them. That's when it went from a simple theft to something else entirely. One of the men carrying the TV dropped his side, letting it crash to the floor. He turned, and from his waistband, he pulled out a can of bear mace. He didn't hesitate. He sprayed it directly at my manager, who went down screaming, clutching his face. The other two didn't even flinch. They grabbed a smaller, but still expensive soundbar from a display, and all three were out the emergency exit before we could even process what happened. The woman who'd been distracting me was just gone, vanished. It was a coordinated, violent exit. We called the police, but they were long gone. My manager was okay, eventually, but the encounter left a permanent scar on all of us. Shoplifting isn't just theft anymore. For many of us on the floor, it feels like a contact sport we never signed up for. Confronting a thief is now a primary trigger for violence in retail. Our next story comes from a viewer who worked the late shift at a 24-hour pharmacy. The quiet hours between 2 and 5 am are usually for stockers and the occasional insomniac buying milk. But for her, it became the stage for a different kind of horror. He came in every night, same time, 3:15 a.m., never bought anything. He would just walk the aisles. At first, she thought nothing of it, but then she noticed the pattern. He'd always end up in the aisle she was working in. Not near her, but at the other end, just ... watching. He was a tall man, gaunt with eyes that seemed too big for his face. He never spoke. He'd just stand there, sometimes for 20 minutes, his head slightly tilted. She tried moving to another aisle. He'd follow. She went to the break room. When she came back out, he'd be waiting, standing by the registers, pretending to look at magazines. The store was huge and mostly empty, which only amplified the feeling of being watched. The psychological toll was immense. This kind of silent intimidation is a widespread issue, with 54% of retail workers having observed aggressive or harassing customer behaviors. It was impossible to report. What could she say? A man is looking at me? She mentioned it to her manager, who told her that as long as he wasn't stealing or being aggressive, there was nothing they could do. She felt completely powerless. One night, she was in the cosmetics aisle when she dropped her price gun. As she bent down to pick it up, she saw his shoes under the bottom shelf, in the aisle behind her. He had been standing there the whole time, perfectly still, perfectly silent, just on the other side of the display. She didn't even scream. A cold dread just washed over her. She stood up, walked directly to the manager's office, and told him she was quitting. She grabbed her purse and walked out, not even waiting for him to respond. As she pushed through the glass doors, she glanced back. He was standing at the front of the store, watching her leave, not even trying to hide it anymore. This story comes from a young woman who worked in a clothing store. It's a chilling reminder that violence doesn't always start with a physical act. So often, it begins with verbal abuse, something 77% of retail workers in a recent UK survey said they had experienced in the past year. She was working the register on a busy Saturday. The line was long, and people were getting impatient. A woman came to the counter to return a dress. It was stained and clearly worn, with no tags. Company policy was firm. No tags, no return. The employee explained this as politely as she could. The customer's demeanor changed in an instant. "What do you mean you can't return it?" "I just bought it." The employee calmly pointed out the visible stain and the missing tags. The woman's voice got louder. "Are you calling me a liar? You think I'm some kind of scammer?" The abuse escalated quickly. The woman called her incompetent, a loser, a string of other names that made the other customers in line shift uncomfortably. The employee held her ground, repeating the store policy, her voice shaking just a little. That's when the threats began. "I know people," the woman hissed, leaning over the counter. "I know where you work." It would be a shame if something happened to you on your way home. This is a reality for so many workers. One survey showed about 53% have been threatened by a customer in the past year. The employee felt a surge of pure fear. This wasn't about a dress anymore. The woman finally stormed out, but not before slamming her hand on the counter and promising, "You'll regret this." For a week, security had to walk the employee to her car. The woman never came back, but the fear lingered. It's the kind of unresolved ending that haunts you, a reminder of how quickly a normal interaction can turn into a terrifying threat. Closing time is often the most dangerous part of the day for a retail worker. This story from a former hardware store employee shows exactly why. It was 10 minutes past closing. The last announcements had been made, the doors were locked, and he was doing a final sweep of the massive store. That's when he found him. A man in the back corner of the lumber aisle, just standing there with an empty cart. "Sir, we're closed," the employee said politely. The man just stared at him. "I need to get a few things." The employee explained again that the registers were closed and he needed to leave. The man's grip on the cart tightened. "I'm not leaving until I get what I came for." A sense of dread started to creep in. The store was empty except for him, his manager, and one other coworker, all waiting up front. He radioed his manager, who told him to escort the man to the front. But the man wouldn't budge. Instead, he started slowly pushing the cart toward the employee, backing him into a row of shelving. These kinds of late-night aggressions are frighteningly common, especially with post-pandemic staffing shortages that often leave workers alone and vulnerable. The employee, a young man just trying to get through college, was terrified. The man was much larger than him and clearly agitated. Finally, the manager came jogging down the aisle. "What's the problem here?" he asked. The customer turned his attention to the manager and started shouting about poor service. It was the distraction the employee needed. He slipped past the cart and hurried to the front of the store. The manager eventually calmed the man down and got him to leave, but it took another 20 minutes. For that entire time, the employee sat in the break room, his heart pounding. The feeling of being trapped, cornered in an empty store, is a fear he says he'll never forget. Recent data shows that 31% of women working in retail report feeling unsafe on the job, and this story is a harrowing example of why. It comes from a woman who worked in a bookstore. A man started coming in regularly, always during her shift. He'd ask her for recommendations, which seemed normal at first. But his questions became more and more personal. He asked if she had a boyfriend, where she lived. He'd compliment her appearance in ways that made her skin crawl. He would follow her around the store, staying just a few feet away, even when she was trying to help other customers. She did her best to ignore him, giving short, polite answers and trying to stay in the more crowded sections of the store. But his behavior escalated. One afternoon, while she was shelving books on a low shelf, he came right up behind her, invading her personal space. "You smell nice," he whispered, his voice right by her ear. She shot up, startled and disgusted. She told him, firmly, to leave her alone. He just smiled, a cold, empty smile, and said, "I'm just being friendly." Sexual harassment is a pervasive issue, with about 1 in 5 female retail workers experiencing or witnessing it. She reported him to her manager, who agreed to keep an eye out. But the man was smart. He never did anything overtly aggressive when the manager was around. He would just watch her from a distance, making sure she saw him. The psychological strain was unbearable. She started having panic attacks before her shifts. After a month of this relentless, low-grade terror, she transferred to a different location, just to escape him. The lack of resolution, the fact that he faced no consequences, is what makes this story so deeply unsettling. Not all encounters end without a climax. Sometimes, the violence that is so often threatened becomes a reality. This account is from a loss prevention officer at a large department store. He'd been watching a man for about 30 minutes. The man was stuffing high-end jackets into a duffel bag with a brazen disregard for the cameras or staff. Confronting shoplifters is incredibly dangerous and a leading cause of violence against retail staff. The officer followed the man as he made his way toward the exit, bypassing all the registers. As trained, the officer approached him once he was past the final point of sale. "Sir, I need you to come back inside with me." The man didn't say a word. He just dropped the bag and swung. A fist connected with the officer's jaw, sending him stumbling back. The man then tried to run, but the officer, despite the ringing in his ears, managed to grab his arm. What followed was a full-on brawl in the store's vestibule. The man was swinging wildly, kicking and spitting, fueled by a desperation the officer had seen many times before. Eventually, with the help of another security guard, they were able to restrain him. The police arrived and took him away. The officer was left with a split lip, a bruised cheekbone, and the jarring memory of the man's rage. This is the reality for the 11% of retail workers who are physically assaulted on the job each year, a number that is tragically on the rise. The stolen goods were recovered, but the sense of safety was shattered. Story 7. This final story is perhaps the most terrifying, because it hangs on a single, unanswered question. It comes from a young man working at a convenience store, one of the most frequent sites of workplace violence. It was late, close to midnight. A man came in, agitated and sweating. He wanted to buy a pack of cigarettes, but was a few dollars short. The employee, following policy, told him he couldn't sell them. The man started pleading, then demanding. The employee held firm. The man reached into his pocket. For a split second, the employee was certain he was pulling out a weapon. His life flashed before his eyes. He braced himself. But instead of a gun or a knife, the man pulled out a pair of scissors. The kind you'd find in a kid's pencil case. He opened and closed them a few times, the snick-snick sound cutting through the tense silence. He looked the employee dead in the eye and said, "It's so easy to just cut through things." He then dropped the scissors on the counter, turned, and walked out of the store without another word. Was it a threat? Was he just a disturbed individual? The employee never found out. He stood there for a long time, staring at the brightly colored scissors, his heart pounding in his chest. That ambiguity, the not knowing, is its own form of psychological terror. He never saw the man again, but the image of those scissors, and the chilling words that came with them, are burned into his memory. The stories you've heard tonight are not isolated incidents. They are part of a rising tide of violence and aggression that retail workers face every single day. From organized crime to individual acts of harassment, the front lines of retail have become an increasingly dangerous place to work. If you have a story of your own that you'd like to share for a future video, please submit it to the email address in the description below. Your stories help shed light on these important issues. If you found this video impactful, please consider liking and subscribing for more content. Stay safe out there. Title: Security Guard's Last Radio Call Before He Disappeared. This story is a work of fiction. But while the people and the place, the Blackwood Industrial Complex, are made up, the story is built around a question that haunts the edge of every lonely night shift. What's the worst thing that could possibly be out there, waiting in the dark? For one security guard, the answer came crackling over a radio, just moments before he vanished forever. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. It's not a person. I don't know what it is. Its shape, it's inside the... Asterisk. At 58, Frank Miller was a creature of habit, and he liked it that way. For the past 12 years, that habit was the night shift at the Blackwood Industrial Complex, a sprawling graveyard of brick and steel. It was a collection of cavernous warehouses, silent production floors, and abandoned office buildings that still needed protecting. His routine was a slow, deliberate rhythm he performed 5 nights a week. He'd show up at 10:45 p.m., relieve the evening guard, and pour himself a cup of coffee that was always just a little too bitter. The first hour was always spent in the main security booth at Gate A, scanning the uneventful logs from the day shift, the drone of the fluorescent lights, a familiar hum. At midnight, he'd start his first patrol. His golf cart, Unit 7, would hum to life, its headlights cutting a weak path through the crushing darkness of the complex. The place was immense miles of chain-link fence, surrounding acres of empty asphalt and buildings that groaned in the night air like sleeping giants. Frank knew every pothole, every flickering lamp, every spot the feral cats would scatter from. He was a simple man with a wife, 2 grown kids, and a mortgage just 3 years from being paid off. This quiet, predictable job was just the final stretch before a retirement full of fishing and complaining about the weather. He actually found comfort in the silence. Tonight started just like any other. The air was cool, the sky was clear, and the silence was absolute. Around 1:15 a.m., while patrolling the western perimeter, Frank made his first radio call of the night. Just a routine check-in, Unit 7 to dispatch. Go ahead, Unit 7. Just checking in. All quiet at the west fence. Heading over to Warehouse 4 now. Over. Roger that, 7. All quiet on this end. Out. As he steered the cart along an access road near the oldest part of the complex, a row of derelict buildings from the 50s a sound sliced through the night. A sharp metallic clang. It wasn't the familiar groan of settling metal. This was aggressive, like a heavy steel door being slammed shut. Frank stopped the cart and killed the engine. He just listened. The only sound was the wind. He keyed the radio again, his voice still calm, but now with an edge of alertness. Unit 7 to dispatch. Go ahead, 7. Dispatch, I heard a loud noise over by Warehouse 4. Sounded like a door slam. I'm going to go check it out. Over. Roger, 7. Just so you know, Warehouse 4 has been welded shut for a decade. All entry points are sealed? Over. 10 to 4. Frank replied, a knot tightening in his stomach. Still going to look out. He grabbed his heavy maglite from the cart, its beam cutting a solid line in the dark. He walked the perimeter of Warehouse 4. Just as dispatch said, the massive steel doors were held fast by thick rusted welds. The smaller doors were bolted and padlocked from the outside, covered in years of undisturbed dust and cobwebs. There was no way in, and no way out. He found nothing. Shaking his head, he chalked it up to the wind playing tricks and headed back to his cart, a little rattled but pushing the feeling away. An hour later, Frank was back in the main booth, watching the bank of black and white monitors. Most just showed empty hallways and silent loading bays. He was watching camera 12, aimed down the long central corridor of the main administration building, when he saw it. A flicker of movement. He leaned in, squinting. It was a shadow way down at the far end of the hall. But it moved all wrong. It wasn't cast by anything. It looked like a patch of darkness peeled itself away from a doorway, flowed across the floor like spilled ink, and then slipped into the stairwell. It was unnaturally fast. His heart started beating a little faster. He rewound the tape, watched it again, and again. It was there. It wasn't a glitch. His hand was trembling slightly as he grabbed the radio. Unit 7 to dispatch. Go ahead, Frank. Everything okay? The dispatcher's use of his first name was a small sign of their long-standing work relationship. Yeah, I think so. Listen, can you pull up the live feed for Admin Cam 12? There was a pause. Got it. Looks clear, Frank. Just an empty hallway. Rewind it. Go back about 2 minutes. Tell me if you see a shadow moving near the far stairwell. Another, longer pause. Frank, I'm looking right at it. There's nothing there. Just some pixelation from the old camera. You getting tired? Frank stared at his own monitor, where the shadow was undeniably and possibly real. No, I'm not tired. There's something on my screen. Over. Could be a feedback loop, 7. We can have maintenance look at your monitor in the morning. All other cameras show the facility is secure. Over. 10 to 4, he said, his voice tight. Out. He felt a cold wash over him that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. He was alone, but for the first time in 12 years, the complex didn't feel empty. It felt occupied. For the next hour, he sat glued to the monitors, his coffee forgotten. Nothing. The stillness returned, but it was different now. It was a heavy, watching kind of stillness. Around 3:30 a.m., he decided he couldn't take it anymore. He had to do another patrol. He had to see that hallway with his own eyes. He drove the cart to the administration building. Inside, the air was stale and cold, and his footsteps echoed on the linoleum. He shined his light down the long corridor from Camera 12's viewpoint. Empty. Dust motes danced in the beam. No shadows. Nothing. He stood there for a long moment, feeling like an idiot. Maybe the dispatcher was right. Maybe he was just tired. He turned to leave, and that's when he heard it. Not a clang this time. A whisper. It came from the stairwell where the shadow had disappeared. It was too faint to be a word, more like the sound of dry leaves hittering on pavement, but it had a rhythm, like a voice. He froze, his blood turning to ice. Unit 7. To dispatch, he whispered into the radio, his voice cracking. Frank, your transmission is weak. What's your location? Admin building. Main hall. Dispatch. I think someone's in here with me. Say again, 7? Your signal is breaking up. I heard a voice, he said, louder now, his fear steamrolling his professionalism. From the stairwell. Frank, nobody is in that building. It's locked and sealed. No alarms have been triggered. Are you sure you're okay? I'm not crazy. He nearly shouted into the radio. I'm telling you, I heard something. I'm checking the stairwell. Over. Frank, wait for backup. Do not go in there alone. Over. Or Frank didn't hear it. He was already moving, his flashlight beam slicing nervously into the stairwell's darkness, his heart pounding against his ribs. He took the stairs one by one, the concrete making every scuff of his boots sound like a gunshot. The whispering was gone. Now there was just a deep, listening silence. He reached the second-floor landing and swept his light around. Empty, just peeling paint and decades of grime. He kept going, up to the third floor. As his foot hit the top step, a low hum started. He didn't hear it with his ears so much as feel it in his bones. A deep vibration that made his teeth ache. The air grew thick, charged with static that made the hair on his arms stand on end. His breath hitched. He knew, with a certainty that made no sense, that he was not alone. He swept his flashlight across the landing. It lit up a back wall, a fire extinguisher, and a closed door marked records. And then his light found it. Huddled in the corner, where the wall met the floor, was a shape. At first, he thought it was a pile of old tarps, but then it moved. It unfolded. It wasn't a person. It was too tall. Its limbs were too long, and they were jointed at angles that were just wrong. It had no features he could see, just a shifting humanoid silhouette of pure, empty blackness. Frank stumbled back, a cry catching in his throat. He fumbled for his radio, his fingers clumsy with sheer terror. Dispatch, this is Unit 7. It's not a person. I don't know what it is. Its shape, it's inside the thing on the landing surged forward. The last thing the dispatcher heard was a wet, tearing sound, immediately followed by a deafening blast of static that cut to absolute silence. Unit 7, come in? Frank, respond. Over. Silence. Unit 7, what is your status? Frank, do you copy? Over. Only the faint hiss of an open channel answered. After 5 minutes of failed attempts to make contact, the dispatcher called the police, reporting a possible emergency with an unresponsive guard. 2 patrol cars were there in 10 minutes. They found the main security booth empty, with the monitor for camera 12 frozen on an image of the empty hall. They found Unit 7 parked outside the administration building, keys still in the ignition. Inside, Frank Miller's heavy flashlight was on the floor, its beam still pointing toward the dark opening of the stairwell. They searched the entire building. There were no signs of forced entry, no signs of a struggle. On the 3rd floor landing, forensics found 2 things they couldn't explain. The air was a full 15 degrees colder than the rest of the building, and the battery-powered smoke detector on the ceiling was fried, its plastic casing melted. Of the thing Frank described, there was no trace. The security tapes were taken as evidence. When they were reviewed, the footage from camera 12 showed exactly what the dispatcher had seen: an empty hall. No shadow. The audio logs were analyzed, and Frank's final, panicked transmission was crystal clear. But the sound that followed it, that tearing noise, could not be identified. It matched no known animal or machine on Earth. Frank Miller was never seen again. His car was still in the parking lot. His locker was untouched. He had simply vanished from a locked building inside a secured complex, leaving behind only 30 seconds of pure terror on a tape recorder. Conclusion. The official report lists Frank Miller as a missing person, likely the victim of foul play. But the few who have heard that tape, who know about the cold spot on the 3rd floor landing, they tell a different story. They talk about old, forgotten places, and the things that wake up when the rest of the world is asleep. And they're left with the same chilling question. What was waiting in the dark at the Blackwood Industrial Complex? And what happens when the last radio call is answered only by silence? What do you think happened to Frank Miller? Let me know your theories in the comments. And if you want more mysteries from the shadows, make sure to subscribe